Do you want to get up to 2.5 times more dividends from your investment? When I receive a dividend, I have two choices. I can spend it or I can reinvest it. And for me, I almost always choose to reinvest it because at this stage, I am still building. I am trying to make my cash flow grow bigger. Right now, my dividends as tiny workers that works for my future. And every time I reinvest them, I am sending those workers back to work. One or two workers may not do much on its own, but if I keep reinvesting my dividends, it will become a massive force to reckon with. That is the simple idea behind reinvesting dividends. So let's imagine this. Imagine there are two versions of you. One is called spend now, the other is called spend later. Both start with $10,000 and both invest in something that pays dividends. Now, spend now receives dividends and spends them, maybe on food, maybe on bills, maybe on something nice. But spend later does something different. Spend later receives the same dividends but reinvests them. In other words, spend later sends those tiny workers back to work, and over time, those workers bring back more workers. That means using the dividend cash to buy more shares or more income producing investments. So the next dividend does not only come from the original $10,000, but also comes from the dividends that were reinvested earlier. That is compounding. And the interesting part is not just that the portfolio gets bigger, the future dividend income gets bigger too. Let's say each version of you invested $10,000 with three different dividend yields: 2.5%, 5%, and 10%. These are just examples to illustrate the idea. Scenario one with 2.5% dividend yield at 2.5%, $10,000 gives around $250 a year. If the spend now you spends that dividend every year, 10 years later, spend now you will still receive the same $250 a year because the original investment is still $10,000. Now let's look at spend later you who reinvests every dividend. At 2.5% dividend yield, the $10,000 could grow to around $12,800 after 10 years, which means your annual dividend is no longer $250. It have grown to $320 a year. Spend now you gets $250 and spend later you gets $320 every year. The difference is not huge but significant. And spend later you now has a permanently higher income stream without adding extra money. Next, let's take a look at scenario 2 with 5% dividend yield. $10,000 gives around $500 a year. If spend now you spends it, that is $500 a year to enjoy. And 10 years later, spend now you is still receiving $500 a year. On the other hand, spend later you choose to reinvesting. After 10 years, the $10,000 could grow to around $16,300. And now the annual dividend becomes around $800 a year. Spend now you gets $500 per year. Spend later you gets $800 per year, every year. That is a 60% increase in annual dividend income. Not because spend later you found a better investment, not because spend later you added more money, simply because all the dividends were reinvested. Now, let's take a look at scenario 3 with 10% dividend yield. Some dividend stocks, REITs, high yield ETFs, or covered call ETFs may offer yields around this range. Of course, higher yields often come with different risks and trade offs. But for this example, let's focus on the compounding effect. Here, you invested $10,000 at 10% dividend yield, which gives you $1,000 a year. If spend now you spends it, that is $1,000 a year to buy some nice stuff. And 10 years later, spend now you is still receive $1,000 a year. But if spend later you reinvests it, the $10,000, and this grows to around $25,900 at the end of 10 years, which means your annual dividend becomes around $2,500 a year. Spend now you gets $1,000 per year, and spend later you gets $2,500 per year every year. That is more than 2.5 times more the annual income. And this is the part that changed how I think about dividends. When I spend a dividend today, I get a short term reward. When I reinvest them, I build a larger paycheck for the future. Right now, I choose to reinvest all my dividend and keep the ball rolling. My approach is simple: receive dividend, reinvest dividend, grow future dividend, repeat. Of course, this is not for everyone. Some people need the income now, and that is completely fine. For me, I am focused on building. So when I receive a dividend, I ask, do I want this now or do I want more later? Most of the time, I choose later. This is not financial advice, just how I think about my own journey. Here's a question. Do you spend your dividends or reinvest them? Let me know in the comments below.